I'm back. This is Lily, and I am so excited to talk about knitting again. It's been about a month since my podiversary, and this is episode 15 of the Curatorial Knits podcast. I am so glad it is sunny out. I think the last time I filmed was maybe the last time we had like a proper, real, full, bright day, and I know all of my friends in places all over the world have had a lot of odd weather, but here in Northern California, we were really just like not prepared for weather, but really not prepared for weather. And it has been just pouring. We've had, I think, 4 or 5 atmospheric rivers over the past month, and it's amazing. The hills are bright green. It's stunning, but it is really nice to see the sun, I must say, especially for this real California girl at heart. I don't do great with the gloom and the cold. It's literally why I started knitting as an adult in the first place, was because I was cold when I lived in New York. And so yeah, it's just really nice to see Mr. Sun again. And it's been a bit. I haven't been able to podcast for a while. I had 2 different weeks where I assumed it was going to happen and it just didn't. I had rotating sick children, but I did get quite a bit of knitting done. We also have some really fun announcements. We have the giveaway winner of the Purl Soho linen quill, and why don't I just get started with that? So if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I am a California knitter, and that's what I talk about, knitting and living in California. I have a background in art and art history. I try to bring that with me to the work that I do with my own creative practice, which is in knitting and fiber arts, and sometimes we nerd out about aesthetics and art history too. So it's a pretty good time. And if you're returning, welcome back. So nice to see you. I am definitely drinking my tea. In addition to all the rain, it's brought on some crazy pollen. And I think all of the Bay Area has insane allergies at the moment. And we're starting with the giveaway. Huzzah! Okay, so those of you who watched the last episode may recall that I have 2 quite lovely colors of Purl Soho linen quill. This is the earth, right? Baked earth. And what color is this? This is vintage Celadon. And there are 3 of each color, and they will be going to, a drum roll please, Kirsten Mengel. Kirsten, you got it, girl. It's all you. Thank you for commenting, and thank you to everyone who told me what they enjoyed about knitting, about the podcast, and in some cases what they wanted to make with this, which I highly recommend. It's very lovely to work with, and I have been kind of plugging away on my half and half wrap. It's actually in my backpack. I have a backpack I commute to and from the city with, in San Francisco, where the gallery is, and that's where my half and half wrap lives. So we won't be taking a look at it today. It's just, I get like 3 rows done, 3 kind of back and forth passes. That's my goal each time I hop on the BART. Because now, do we get to talk about it? Guys, look. It's a zipper sweater. That's right. We're gonna go straight into what I'm wearing and finished objects. This is the Larneck sweater by Rebecca Clow. It is absolutely my most worn garment. I have worn this 5 times since I actually got the zipper finished. I will say I did try to pin it in. It didn't look great. It didn't look great, and I just didn't trust my hand sewing. So I did take it to a really amazing tailor here, local, just around the corner from me in Oakland, and he did an amazing job. He was also quite complimentary about the knit, and I have to say, I love it. As you can see, it is half fisherman's rib. It was not a fast knit. It was a test knit. I did finish the garment in time to fill out the form and give feedback on the actual yardage and the construction, but it did take me a while to figure out what to do about the zipper. So I just got it back from the tailor 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago about. But I know that a lot of folks are planning on making them both for themselves and or for a significant other or spouse. I think that these are fantastic for gifts. If I were a better person, I'd make one for my husband, but quite frankly, it was just a lot of knitting, y'all. It was like a lot of knitting. And I made mine out of Corrie worsted from La Bien Aimee, and it uses a ton of yarn. It used about a skein and a half more than the original estimates for the yarn. Those have now been updated, but I will say I'm not sure I would use this yarn for this project. Now that it's done, I love it, and I'm so happy I knitted out of this yarn. But it was not a budget-friendly yarn to use just because of the amount of yarn that went into it. I know Rebecca has a lot of really great options, both for mid-range and lower-priced yarns for it, and so definitely check out the Ravelry page, which will be linked below in the description box. Just click see more, and all of the patterns and yarns that I talk about will be linked there, including the Larneck. I think one of the most satisfying parts of this knit is definitely the collar. I blocked mine to be quite exaggerated. I really like this high neck. There's the kind of Varley sweatshirt, which I have one of and love, and also I think Cool, the striped sweater and shirt brand, they also have these really exaggerated collars that are, I think, quite on trend right now. So that was kind of fun to kind of feel like we were making something that was both a super staple but had the not potential, but there were ways in which it was also kind of in touch with and accessing things that were on trend for the season. So that's finished object number 1. And then I also finished my Lento, and I finished this quite a bit ago. It is real great. I did a solid, I finished it with just the yardage that I had. If you might remember, I was super concerned about having enough yarn. I actually think my tension ended up really nice with this because I was concerned about yardage. I don't know how, but I think that it looks really nice. I think my raglan creases on this one are also quite nice, and of course my collar. My collar is so straight. This is definitely the best folded over collar that I have completed thus far, I think. It just really looks nice. I did not do a tubular bind off on the bottom. I just wanted it to feel like it had a hard edge around it. And I did do my normal for me body shaping. So you can see some decreases in the back. They're not completely hidden, and along the side as well. And I talked about this in my kind of Ask Me Anything discussion at the end of the last podcast. I didn't even really know I was doing it, but I do really think that it works for me to create a little bit of shaping. Did I do any on the, I didn't do any on the test knit. because obviously I just wanted to knit it exactly per the pattern. And I think for this garment, it's quite nice to have it oversized. And one of the things I like quite a bit is how the half fisherman's rib goes into seamlessly goes into the rib along the bottom edge there. So that worked out quite nicely. So those are my finished objects. The Lento sweater is designed by Jonna Hietala, and it is knit out of the Wandering Flock Merino DK and held with the corresponding mohair from the Wandering Flock. And I believe this color is called Steel Gray, and it's really, really easy to wear, and I really enjoy it. So 2 great springy-ish projects off the needles. This is such a good transitional item. I know I'm gonna wear this a ton. Next up in the whips, we have my Marseille sweater, which I have finished the body for, but which is not without complications. Okay, first of all, the color is amazing. This is by far one of my favorite colors and color combos I've done. Isn't it so cool? I think I'm gonna try to, here. It's huge. It's huge, guys. I know everyone said that petite knit patterns were really oversized. I did a swatch, but I didn't. Okay, so the yarn. But really and truly, this is a conversation about yarn. I am doing I'm making a garment that has the amount of ease that I would like it to have when it comes to the gauge of the yarn. But then the gauge of the yarn on my 3rd skein changed. Sorry, I don't know why there's a little weird. Oh, I'll tell you why there's that weird blip. Because the size of the yarn changed. Here is the fingering yarn that I was working with. Here is the quote-unquote fingering yarn of the next, and it was labeled fingering, I promise, of the next skein I pulled out. So in addition to it being thicker and giving me a band when I first used it, it gave me a band right here of very, very different feeling fabric. In addition to that, it also, here, let me see if you can see it. Do you see how it's like smaller stitches, bigger stitches, smaller stitches right there? It also means that I had less yarn because it was obviously weighed out, and so the amount of yarn is less. So I'm pretty nervous that I made something so giant, and now I have this left over for the sleeves. I have some ideas of how I'm going to get around it. I'm going to use a thicker yarn to pick up my stitches, and then I'm going to measure this out and just go for as far as I can. I really want to try to make the stripes match up, but I may end up doing the cuffs, do like longer cuffs and make them in the navy. I also used the thicker yarn on its own and did little stripes in the ribbing for the bottom of the sweater, which I think is kind of fun. And it was also a way just to kind of use up the thicker yarn in a place where I didn't think it would matter as much. So I think this is going to be really a great sweater. I think it's going to be giant, and I think it's going to be like a bit of a thing, but I do really like it. And it's so springy. Honestly, I'm not sure if the color's coming out exactly. I'm going to try to get it really perfectly. Okay, I think that's it. I think so. Yeah. It's so bright, and it really does look like the fields right now after all the rain, all the beautiful rain we've had. So yes, it is a monster of a sweater, but I do think I'm gonna get a lot of use out of it. It's just gonna take some, you know, a little bit of mental math, and it's gonna be quite oversized. So I think in terms of styling, it will work okay with my kind of current look, but it's gonna be a little different than anything I made before. I'm excited, but I haven't picked up for the sleeves just because I am a little bit nervous about the yarn switchover. I do think I'm gonna have enough. I've done some math. I think it's gonna be okay, but like I said, I still am a bit nervous about all that. And I'm also like a little bummed that the texture of the yarn had such dramatic shifts. And that said, I think it's worth it because the color is so on point. So it's, yeah, I think it's kind of like a wait and see on this one. Marseille sweater by Petite Knit, and I'm knitting it in Hellomello Spinnery, which their fingering weight yarn, which I purchased at Rhinebeck, and I'm holding it with Santa's Garn Tin Silk Mohair in the color, I don't know, jolly green, jelly bean green, something like that. And that halo is, I think, helping with some of the shifts in the texture changing of the yarn. So I do think that that's helping out a bit. Sorry, allergy congestion is afoot. In fact, I brought the teapot because I do find that not only does it get a little chilly, but I knew I was gonna want more than 1 cup as we moved through things today. All right, next up, what should I talk about next? Oh, so many of you had been, this is probably one of the projects I've had the most interactions around, which is my previous version of the Midori Hirose Pappus pullover. It is a really interesting construction. Oh no, Lil, I thought I had finished this row. Sorry, team. Well, this is gonna be suboptimal. Okay, maybe I'll talk about it for a second I'll talk about the genesis of it while I knit this row. So this was a piece that I originally made I originally made a 3-strand mohair version of this sweater last spring, and I made it out of Wandering Flocks silk mohair in a really beautiful kind of variegating, hand-dyed yellow to blue to purple kind of shifting yarn. And I wore it to a dinner at an artist's home last summer, and that artist then came to the gallery for her exhibition last fall, and I ended up wearing a sweater that looked a lot like one of her paintings. And she and I had kind of touched base about knitting before. Her work has a lot of allusions to textile and to the idea of kind of a grid or a network, the idea of the space of the painting or of a canvas being more kind of an open space, really, a place for something to kind of go through. She pushes paint actually through the canvas from one side to another. Her name is Hietala, and she's absolutely brilliant. And so I offered to knit her a sweater. And so this was back in like November. And at first I thought it would be like a Christmas thing, but then things got really crazy. And I said, you know, what would you like to do? And she said, just make me something like what you wore to our house. And I said, great, because this is actually a fairly quick knit. It's we're not quick, but it's straightforward and it's really flexible. It's knit as kind of a one size only. It's more of a, I will say, I think that the pattern is really smart, but it really is more of a recipe than a pattern. There are occasional stitch counts, but it's really up to you to decide kind of how large it could or should be. So because it's so kind of oversized and has a really flexible range of ease, I did think it was a good idea to use as the pattern for a gift, right? Especially if since I'm making a garment, so I don't need to have kind of exact measurements. This is the kind of thing that looks great on, you know, over a tank top. It's really beautiful. So I'm just kind of plugging along and I'm having a lot of fun, because what I'm doing is, instead of kind of fading in multiple strands, which I also did in my previous version, so that the neckline starts with just one strand of mohair, so it's quite thin, but because it's silk, it's really strong, so I don't have to worry about there being too much weight or pressure. So it starts out at a, you know, this very open gauge with just one strand of mohair. It uses a provisional cast on, and so you go knitting kind of all the way across the neckline back and forth. And I think some folks I had spoken to had some questions about the construction, and I realized a lot of those are things I should probably talk about publicly because it's a paid for pattern. But I will just say that if you follow the instructions and don't actually think too hard about what you think it's supposed to look like, I think it really helps. It's one of those cases, again, where you're driving at night, right? Where you can only see a little ways ahead of you. And the kind of, even though the instructions might seem cryptic if you read it without having done, you know, the pattern thus far, I think it becomes really clear once you've done it. Just don't think about it, just execute. And then it will make more sense. So what I'm using though for this piece is the Farmer's Daughter Fibers Mohair in Glacial Lake as kind of my main color. And then what I'm doing is I'm fading in 2 different colors to create a kind of, yeah, a color fade, which now that I'm finishing this last stitch, I think I'll be able to show nicely. Okay, so this is the garment. And as you can see, I'm knitting all the way across. I have the neckline here, which is open. It's very wide. I'll probably stitch up the edges of that, which is also something I did on my other piece. And then here's my sleeve on this side. And the colors that I'm fading in are all mohairs from Purl Soho. And I bought these many, many years ago, so this is a really fun project to use them for. I have their silk mohairs here. And so I'm going from the Farmer's Daughter Fibers, that kind of main color, and then fading in these 3. I also have a much darker color that I'm also thinking I will use. This is a leftover skein of lichen and lace from my Lily Kate Makes sweater. So anyway, it's been really, really fun. I'm excited to get it off. I think it's going to be such a bright kind of springy garment, and I think you two will really love it. So it's the only the second time I've remade a sweater. The first obviously was my Lento, which I'm on number 3 of, and then there's that piece. But I thought I was just gonna have 2 whips this month. Like that was kind of what I had written out for myself, is that I would have my Marseille sweater and Utah's Pappus pullover, and I was just gonna work on those and get them finished in March. Is that what I did? No. Apparently I have to have 3 sweater whips at all times, because when I was in Portland, I saw like 3 or 4 of the most amazing Easy V sweaters, and I was super, super inspired. I knew I wanted to get some Spin Cycle Dream State, and so I just cast it on the other night. My husband was out of town for work, my kids were asleep, and I just cast on, living my irresponsible cast on life. So I've only gotten thus far, but what I decided to do, and I'm pretty excited about, is that rather than have 3 different colors of the Spin Cycle dyed in the wool, I'm gonna alternate Spin Cycle dyed in the wool, or not dyed in the wool, excuse me, Dream State, which is their worsted weight, which is really a DK, like don't get it twisted. I'm going to alternate that with these leftover DK weight yarns that I have from, what's it called again? Sorry, from Wandering Flock. So I'm going to be alternating those, and I'm really excited about the way it's turned out so far. And yeah, it's been a really fun one. And I also feel like I just always have to have a little bit of color work on my needles. Otherwise, you know, stripes are great, but they're not color work. I love my color work. So that is that, right? Got 3 whips, 2 finished objects. We already did our giveaway announcement. Congratulations again, Kirsten. And now I do have acquisitions because I went to the Rose City Yarn Crawl. So if this is your first time tuning in, it might be news that I am on a bit of a yarn buying. It's not a hiatus. It's I've created some boundaries. That's it. I've created some boundaries around my yarn buying. And my primary boundary is that I can only buy yarn in person. I have made some exceptions. One is yarn that I have seen in person that I know is for a planned project and that they didn't have enough of, so I'll show you that today. And then the other is for my birthday sweater, which is the Twigs sweater, and I'm very excited about what I purchased, but it's not kind of finalized, so I'll show that another time. What I'm talking about today is primarily the yarn I knew I wanted to purchase for specific projects. So I went to the Rose City Yarn Crawl in Portland, Oregon, and was able to find some really, really special things. And they are all, I think, gonna be really fun to work with. So the first is this really fantastic new to me yarn. This is Bear Paw DK from Daughter Fibers. And it is 20% yak, 20% silk, and 60% merino. And I really love this color. I think it's really kind of different for me, but still really in my wheelhouse. And I can't decide if I'd like this to be the main color for a sheep camp sweater, or so that's another color work yoke that I've been wanting to make for a while. Or I might use it on its own in another Caitlin Hunter design. Oh, I should have said, the Easy V is by Caitlin Hunter. And she has another, I think it's a V-neck design that has a kind of open cabled lace work motif, and I forget what it's called right now, but that's something I have my eye on for this. Or like I said, sheep camp, which I'm also super excited about. The other completely unplanned purchase is this. This is Wool Folk Fleck, and it's their tweed DK yarn. And I bought this, it's really pretty. I bought this because of a sample. I get it, I get the sample thing now. I saw this sweater in the shop. It was, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. The yarn store is escaping me right now. I'll write it down below. It is definitely the yarn store with kind of the widest selection. It had everything. It had beautiful Jamieson and Smith in addition to lots of other kind of larger brands, and then some hand-dyed yarn. They had the largest selection of spin cycle I've ever seen. It was, oh, For Yarn's Sake. That's the name of the store, For Yarn's Sake. And it's outside of Portland a little ways in Beaverton. Anyway, totally worth a trip, and they had samples of almost every yarn, which was super exciting. And so I just saw a sweater and I thought I could make that. I could make that and it would be really beautiful. So I got it. I will put an image of the sweater here so you can see what I'll be making hopefully this summer. It's also pretty light. I don't think it's a super woolly wool to the touch, so it might be an easy one to make when the weather warms up. And then finally, the Dream State, which I purchased, which is the spin cycle kind of thicker yarn, and this is to make the Trinnigan cardigan with the Lucky Tweed that I had previously purchased. This was a planned acquisition. Quite delighted with that. And for the finale, I got a super basic yarn, y'all. This is the Sanduskarn Double Sunday in the color Putty to make my Sanduskarn Guernsey Gensler, which is one of my kind of top must-make 2023 knits. And my idea was that even if I found the color I wanted to knit it, which is this Putty, which is a really kind of cool toned white. There's so much kind of white and warm white out there that I wanted to go kind of skew a little cooler. But I wasn't sure I wanted to do a mohair. Lucky for me, and this was the online purchase for this, there is a new, I think it's newish, it's alpaca, but it's lace weight alpaca. Has a very kind of soft halo. It's not too, it's really quite lovely. And so I'll be holding this instead of the Tin Silk Mohair, because the Tin Silk Mohair, which I really have enjoyed using on this large Marseille sweater, it's pretty thick on its own. It's not just mohair, it has wool in it too, and it has a lot going on. So I wanted to keep it really simple for my white sweater. And that's what I did. So I would say very successful, limited purchases, kind of with exceptions for things that were exceptional. Hi y'all, I'm so sorry. Before I was rudely interrupted, first by my camera running out of batteries, and then by life as I had to do the school run and pick up the kiddos. I am not entirely sure where we left off. I think I had been showing the yarn that I was able to acquire at the Rose City Yarn Crawl, and I had alluded, maybe hinted a bit at the yarn that I was going to be using for my birthday sweater, which will be the Twigs, which I'm very, very excited about. But I don't think I have that much else to talk about. The Rose City Yarn Crawl was really beautiful and wonderful. It was also very family filled, so that was really great. I had some really nice quality time with my niece, which was wonderful. And it was also very, very snowy. So maybe I'll get into that the next podcast, but basically I arrived in the middle of the most snow Portland had seen since 1945. And my mom and I rented a car. We completely lucked out in that we got the last SUV on the lot, the last four-wheel drive vehicle on the lot. And so we started driving and we thought we're totally, you know, gonna get into town. Our Airbnb was like a 30-minute drive from the airport. No problem, right? Y'all, it took us 4 hours and we didn't even make it. We actually stopped and stayed at one of my brother's friends' homes, which was really, really kind of its own beautiful experience. For any folks who used to listen to Garrison Keillor as a kid, if you know the phrase storm home, that's what we found. We found our storm home. Basically, the city was just completely unprepared. All the trucks were unprepared, so there were just trucks stalled out without chains at almost every intersection. It was very hilly, so folks were having trouble getting up hills in the ice and snow, and we had to turn around like 3 different times. I will say the most exciting moment, I think, well, there were two. One was when we were completely stuck on the way to the on-ramp for the freeway, which we never made it to any sort of freeway. In a way, thank goodness. But we were kind of going to make it, and then a truck ahead of us stalled out. We waited for an hour while someone tried to help him get his chains on. It was like a whole situation. And then, you know, we were stuck because there were a ton of people behind us and we couldn't move forward. So I did end up getting out of the car and going around all the cars around us and just saying, okay guys, what if we back up out of here? Like if we all do it together, we can make it happen. So that was a win. You know, we didn't end up living on that on-ramp, which was fantastic. And then we really thought we were gonna make it still. Like we thought we could do it. And at this point we've been driving for more than 3 hours. And then we were moving finally after waiting for another intersection to clear from an emergency vehicle because a bus had broken down. And so we got way too close to this bus. I mean, way too close. It was not great. And that's when we were just like, okay, we gotta find another way to hang with this. And a lot of folks were not as lucky as we were. You know, there are a lot of people who end up sleeping in their cars or you know, having to abandon them and walk. It was a huge storm. It was no joke, but it definitely made me feel for all of my cold weather and stormy weather friends, because it was definitely outside of my experience for sure. But it also meant that I got to wear all of my knits and feel so snuggly and warm. And I'll put in, actually I did take some pretty cool photos and even a little video of just how dense the snow was when it was coming down. It was really quite beautiful. So I'll put that in at the end. I think this episode was maybe a little out of practice. I just feel like it had been too long, but hopefully you stuck with me and saw it through to the end. I really love this sweater. I can't tell you, Rebecca Cloud, the designer, Creabea Knitting Podcast. It's such a great resource for our community. I am so impressed by her work, and this piece is just a staple. It's so fantastic. So, and thank you to everyone who encouraged me with my zipper. And I do think I could have done it, but I do love how clean the tailor made it look. So, and I do like to snuggle up in it sometimes. And I also think it's kind of nice. It did come in, it stretched out a little bit, but I think I can block it back in a bit. But it stands up on its own, which is great with this dense fabric. And yes, thank you all so much for watching, for being here, for supporting me as I put myself out into the world. And I just, you know, always encourage you all to do the same. I will hopefully see you before not too long again. I won't let it go this far. I feel like I actually had more to say and more to talk about, but I was so kind of out of practice that I didn't organize my thoughts well, or who knows. But in any case, I'm gonna stop judging what just went down and say thank you again. Kirsten, I will be in touch, and I can't wait to get you your linen quill. And happy spring, everyone. It is on its way, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.